Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Hangout with HAVYN. That's us. Today we are filming on Samhain or on Halloween.
Spooky.
Today when I was doing some of my Samhain rituals, I was feeling into the energy of fear. And I think a lot of us probably associate Halloween with fear a little bit. So we're going to kind of do our own spin on that. It's not going to be like your stereotypical Halloween, like someone's going to pop up behind the couch in a mask type of fear, although that would have been really clever. So today's episode is going to be about facing fears and acknowledging emotions. So let's dive right in. I think the first question that I'm going to ask you is, what is fear?
Yeah, so I think there's really only two true emotions in life, those being love and fear. So fear would naturally then be the complete opposite of love.
I think of unconditional love as one of the highest frequency vibrations that we can really feel and that exist on at least this planet. And then fear would be one of the lowest frequency vibrations.
Not only is fear a fundamental emotion that we can feel, it's also a very powerful tool as a survival mechanism.
I think one scary thing about fear is that humans have learned to manipulate and control other humans.
Yeah, so
using fear.
It can be used and is used as a very powerful tool in that respect as well. Using people's fear to manipulate them and control them and to control large populations of people to think or feel a certain way based on what their fears are.
Yeah, my hand started doing this, and I think that was like me trying to communicate, like to sway people to do something that they want you to do.
Yeah.
And I mean, we're not going to go into examples of this, but I'm sure that you can think of some that are existing on the planet right now.
That's right.
Now let's tie fear into emotions. One of the beautiful things about the human experience is that we get to experience an array of emotions. However, I have witnessed sometimes feeling emotions is just like straight up uncomfortable. And I think that we can even develop a fear of feeling emotions. So I think that I want to give this topic maybe a little bit more to Shaq and just kind of see what you have to say, because I feel emotions like so often that it's not, I don't think that I should be speaking about this, because I feel my emotions and I feel everybody and everything's emotions like at any given moment. So when or why would you not want to feel an emotion? Or do you have experience with that?
I think what I've found for myself in the past, and I think what a large part of people that I know have felt in the past or they've expressed to me, is that they tie the ideas and feelings surrounding emotion to weakness. That if I feel a certain way, or if I show that I'm sad, or if I cry in front of someone, all of a sudden that equates to me being weak in some manner. Other people may just not feel safe to feel their emotions or express their emotions and their feelings completely based off of their current life situations or their family situations at home. And other people just have a fear of being vulnerable around other humans, I think. They want to feel strong, they want to feel powerful. I think this one ties into the idea of not wanting to come across as weak to someone else. But all of these could not be further from the truth. The strongest thing that we can actually do as humans is to be open and vulnerable and share our thoughts and feelings and emotions
and process them.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So you mentioned a few different emotions, and they were more of what I would probably put in this category of emotions that don't feel good. And you were saying that a lot of the time people don't want to experience, feeling sad. And those make sense to me, because it's like those feel very uncomfortable. Like if I tap into and tune into what my body does when I am, let's say, experiencing anger, then I'll feel, something heavy in my chest. and that just feels like I want it to be gone. So one of the easiest things that I think people do is they just try to ignore it. And we're gonna dive into why that's not a good idea in a couple minutes. But my question for Shaq is, do you also think that people can be uncomfortable to feel emotions that we might classify as more like uplifting or happy emotions, like joy or excitement? Or like, do you think people struggle with those emotions as well?
Absolutely. I think there's this idea that some people want to just remain as neutral as possible when dealing with other people in any situation. So they don't want to come across or seem like they're super excited about something because maybe that would be too childish of them, or they don't want to seem too sad or scared of something because then that just makes them look weak for some reason.
So I think a really cool place to take this now then is to dive into where those beliefs come from in the first place. Because we can talk about all of this stuff about fear and about emotions, but I like to go deep. So we're going deep and I'm taking you with me. The first thing that like really stood out to me with what you just said was they might not want to seem childish. So then that takes me to this place where it's like, okay, let's go back in the timelines to childhood and maybe dive into the emotions there. Why would we not want to appear to be childish?
I think so many people are not even necessarily taught this idea, but they're just kind of subconsciously trained that children are children and adults are adults. And once you pass this certain threshold, you're now an adult and your childhood is gone forever. You're no longer a child and now you need to smarten up because you have responsibilities or something.
There's like these expectations. Yeah, and it kind of seems like in the society that we live in, at least, like this is our experience of growing up in North America, is there's this constant pressure maybe of like leveling up as you age. So it's like, it's okay to be sad when you're a baby because you're expected to cry. That's what we do. But then when you're maybe 3 years old and you're having a temper tantrum at the grocery store, I mean, you could be punished for that. Like some parents, you know, they don't want their kids to throw temper tantrums, so they punish their kids or they threaten them or they say, that's it, we're leaving if you don't stop this. So I think from a really early age, we start to learn.
We're trained how to suppress our emotions. We're not trained to actually feel them entirely and learn to communicate and express them fully.
Right. Another thing that I can kind of think of that we experience, maybe not so early on in childhood, but as we start to enter the school system and we're starting to interact with more kids, we want so badly to fit in because I think it makes us feel more safe if we have people that we can relate to. And that's just human nature. And I think that that's such a beautiful thing, although it can be detrimental if we're not really taught how to navigate it and to also like honor our authentic selves. If we feel something that is different from our peers at a young age, we kind of like instantly want to shut it off because of that desire to fit in society and fit in culture. Or maybe, you know, you grew up in a home where your thoughts, your feelings, the way that you look, the way that you dress is like entirely different from everyone in your family. So you changed yourself in some way so that you could fit into your family system, which is a method of survival, really. So it's so cool to go into and ask yourself these questions. If us talking about this right now is maybe bringing up something, if you're like, oh yeah, I totally relate to that, or maybe it makes you think of a different fear or a different emotion that you experience all the time, it's like, okay, well, go to the root of that. When did that start? Usually it's before the age of 8. That's kind of when the brain shifts into a different way of being. So we absorb a lot of our conditioning before the age of 8. Super cool to like go and dive into the why. Where does this come from?
So I think this brings up the next question, which would be, if these so-called negative emotions don't feel good, why should I feel them in the first place? Why do I feel them, and why should I pay attention to it when it's happening?
So, I mean, this is a really good question because it's just straight up uncomfortable. Sometimes we only want to feel good. Why that is not the most ideal thing to do all of the time in the long span of our lives is because emotions are energy. I think that's just so important. So just because we can't see physically what an emotion looks like, it does have very intense impacts on our mental health and on our physical health. And this is something that just like gets me super excited to talk about because emotions are energetic and they are physical. They can get stored in the body. And when things get stored in the body, they stay there, they stick there, and they start to get bigger and more intense. And then dis-ease or imbalance starts to take place in the body. So then a person can start experiencing physical symptoms from an emotion that was not previously acknowledged. And this can be like something that you experienced when you were 2. And then because you experienced it when you were 2, it came up again, the same fear when you were 4, and then it came up again when you were 5, and then now all of a sudden you're 45. You've still never really addressed where that emotion came from in the first place. So now maybe you have chronic inflammation in your left hip, for example, because that's where this fear, this anxiety, or whatever emotion that it was that didn't feel good, that's where it kind of just got like shoved down. It was like, I don't have time to acknowledge this because I'm just doing my best to survive. So I'm just gonna put it somewhere in my body and just keep going.
And it might not have anything to do with your hip. That's just where the energy stored itself in your body.
Oh yeah, it can be very random. I mean, like, there are common places that we store certain emotions in our body, which is super fun to go into. If you are interested in this at all, a really cool book to check out is You Can Heal Your Life by Louise Hay. And it's just about how our emotions and energetics are tied to our physical body.
So I think it's important to say that just because it doesn't feel good doesn't mean we're not supposed to feel it. You're supposed to feel it as much as you're supposed to feel everything else and every other emotion that you experience in life. You can think of emotions almost like water. It's like this wave that is supposed to pass through you and pass over your body, and we're supposed to acknowledge it while it's happening in the moment, because if we acknowledge it, then as quick as it came, it will just pass as easily. And if we don't acknowledge it, then like Sydney was saying, that's when it will start to get stored in our body. That's when ignoring it will naturally force it to turn into something much worse, illness or disease or some health issue later on in life.
So one common fear that I think a lot of us experience is the fear of the unknown.
I think it's completely natural to be scared or fearful of something that you don't know what it is or something that you don't understand. But at the same time, it can be very detrimental to yourself and to others to just instantly put up a wall, put up a shield towards something that you just don't know anything about, rather than taking the time to educate yourself or learn something about it.
So this ties really nicely along with the fear of change. I don't think I've ever met a person that hasn't been afraid of change in some shape or form. So what is the fear of change, really? What does that mean?
It is very much the fear of the unknown, not knowing what is going to happen, not knowing where you are going, you know, whether it's a change in your living situations, the place that you're living,
relationships,
change of relationship, change of a job or a potential career.
So when you start to experience this fear, you start to feel anxiety over change. I think it's really important then to take it on this deeper, maybe more subconscious level so that you can get to the root of what it is that is actually bothering you in the first place. Okay, so I think it would be interesting to work through an example of this. So let's use relationships as a theme. So I'm afraid to make a change within a relationship that I'm in. How do we now start to work through this fear so that we can make the necessary change without just being scared of it? How I would start this process is to take some time to be by myself, to take some deep breaths, to just kind of allow myself to sink into this deeper, more subconscious level, and just start to kind of ask myself some questions. So, I would maybe just start with, what am I afraid of? Like just starting there. So maybe if we're afraid to make a change in this relationship, maybe one of the fears that comes up is, I'm afraid of losing this person. If I do what I feel I want to do, this person might leave me. Now, the fear of abandonment, I think, is probably one of the first fears that humans have ever experienced on the planet. So just knowing and acknowledging within yourself that it's okay to feel scared of being abandoned, I think is a really great place to start. And then affirming within my being that it is safe for me to be alone, and it is safe for me to be a sovereign entity.
I think there would be a lot of people also that would be scared or fearful of losing a part of themselves in the process as well. Be it in a relationship, or you have this idea of yourself in your head, which is really just attachment to the ego. And you think that, well, if I do this or if I change this, I'm going to become a different person. Therefore, I'm going to lose that part of myself or that version of myself.
Like if I speak my truth in this relationship and stand up for what I believe in, what is that going to cost me?
Exactly. So this is where a lot of fear of change comes into play. Everyone is so bound and determined to try and hold on to everything that they have. They don't want it to change. They don't want anything in their life to be different. But I think it's also really important to note that all of that is just an illusion. The only thing in life that is a fundamental truth is change. The only thing that is possible is change. Even though we wake up every day and our brain just kind of pieces together this idea that everything is the same day to day, everything is constantly in a state of motion, all the way down to the atomic level. Everything in life is constantly changing. Everything in society and relationships is constantly changing. And I think the more that we can really get comfortable with that idea and that fact, the less fearful we will be about change, and the more just open and welcoming we'll be to it.
Well, now I think I'm afraid of not changing. I've gone to the exact opposite, because now it's like, well, if I don't change, if I don't assert myself, or if I don't stand up for myself, or if I don't make the change that I feel deep down that I need to make in this relationship, then where will I be? So it's really kind of cool how fast it can change when you start to go deeper into it. What happens when we let go of fear?
Well, getting back to the idea that there's only two fundamental emotions in life, love and fear. Once you let go of fear, you open up a whole lot of room in your being for love.
It is impossible to never be fearful. It's very important to be afraid sometimes, because being afraid means that we do have some passion and feelings towards what we want the outcome of something to be. And I think that that is very healthy and that is very human, which is amazing. But going back into what Shaq is saying, it's if we are constantly in a state of fear, that's when we really want to learn to surrender and learn to let go, because there's no room for love and there's no room for light if we're constantly vibrating at this frequency of fear. So as we learn to acknowledge our emotions, to really feel our emotions entirely, and to release fear, then we start to welcome in all of these things we need to expand our consciousness, to raise our vibration, so to speak, to step into the person that we authentically are already, but just, you know, there's been some layers and some gunk that's kind of blocked us from being who it is that we really feel like we are and always have been, you know, on that soul level. So let love in, let love guide you, not fear. We really hope that you guys found this conversation stimulating at the least, or maybe just gave you something to think about. Or maybe you're like with your journal and you're like taking notes and you're like, I know what I'm doing tonight. It's full moon energy right now. So it's a really, really amazing time to write a list of things that you do want to let go of. Make a list of things that you are fearful of and burn them, or, you know, throw them out, or just do something kind of like a little ritual for yourself. And I think that would be a cool way to integrate all the things that we've been talking about today.
Until next week.
Peace.